On today's episode of Star Wars Versus, the First Order's mainline battleship goes against its predecessor's most powerful dreadnought. Who would win? I'll tell you today. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Starship Versus. Today is actually a very special episode because it is my very first Patreon request. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I'm going to start once a week making Patreon requests into a full video. Perhaps I'll do them every Friday like I've done today. Today's matchup comes from Amin Ali Jalil. If you want a chance to have your request made into a full video, feel free to join me on Patreon, or of course you can always put your suggestions in the comments. So let's get into it. As always, I'll examine these ships in three different categories: firepower, defensive capabilities, then fighter support. But I will also consider intangibles. Because we're dealing with two ships against one, I'm not going to give a winner for each category. Instead, I'll just discuss the various aspects that need to be addressed. At the end, I'll analyze all various information and determine which side I believe will win. Just out of curiosity, right now take a vote and let me know whether you think two Resurgent Class Star Destroyers could beat a single Executor. Alright, so let's start with weapons, and the Resurgent, despite coming in at under 3 kilometers in length, packs a hell of a punch. The ship is absolutely covered with weapons and placements, with a total of over 1,500 turbo lasers and ion cannons. Besides for several very large and very powerful Imperial 2 style turbo laser batteries on each side of the superstructure, the ship is also dotted with individual weapons and placements. Besides for being numerous, the weapons on the Resurgent were also very powerful. Technology has advanced quite significantly in the 30 years since the end of the Galactic Civil War. Notably, Resurgents also make use of kyber crystals, which increases the power and firing speed of the ship's weapons. Resurgent Battlecruisers also possess excellent defensive weaponry. Learning from the mistakes of the Imperial 2 class of Star Destroyers, they focus heavily on point defense as well as traditional ship-to-ship weaponry. Besides for traditional point defense laser cannons, the Resurgent also made use of retractable point defense missile pods. We see these in the Force Awakens when Finn and Poe get shot down after trying to escape the Finalizer. Looking now at the Executor Class Super Star Destroyer, canon has not given us weapon numbers for this dreadnought, so we will take a look at Star Wars Legends. Typically, the Executor was said to have 2,000 turbo lasers, another 2,000 heavy turbo lasers, various point defense cannons, and then other missile launchers and ion cannons. It's fairly clear that the Executor was a beast. Earlier on, I said that it was the most powerful dreadnought of the Empire. That is certainly true, at least of what we know in canon, and it was an arguable point in Legends as well. Most of the weaponry on the Executor does flow through its wedge shape. It is able to put a lot of firepower on a single target, however its large superstructure does somewhat limit its flexibility. We also see in Return of the Jedi that starfighters are able to use the cityscape on top of the ship and the various nooks and crannies to evade point defense cannons, although the same can be said of the Resurgent. As I said, I'm not going to declare a winner for each section. Let's just move on now to defensive capabilities. Looking at the Executor, there is that infamous moment in Return of the Jedi where a single wayward A-wing appears to take down the entire Super Star Destroyer. However, it should be noted that it was only able to disable the ship because the shields had been destroyed after being continually pounded by the Rebel fleet. That being said, we shouldn't ignore the fact that the bridge, which is obviously critical to the operation of the ship, is in an extremely vulnerable location, something actually remedied by the Resurgent class. That being said, we do know that the deflector shields would have been extraordinarily powerful. I mean, the ship is 19 kilometers long. We also see in The Empire Strikes Back that the massive ship survives in the asteroid field with seemingly little worry, and in Star Wars Legends, 3 Imperial 2 Star Destroyers traveling at hyperspace speed actually collide with a single Super Star Destroyer, and its shields don't even go down. Summing this point up, I think you could say that a Super Star Destroyer has some glaring weak spots, but just given the size of the ship and the fact that its generators are able to produce so much power, allows it to create a very hard to penetrate shield, which at least somewhat mitigates against these weaknesses. Looking now at the Resurgent, there's not a whole lot to say about the ship. We haven't seen it in action, but we do know that it is state of the art. Its shields likely wouldn't stand up to an Executor Super Star Destroyer just because of the size difference, but I bet they're considerably even 2 or 3 times more substantial than what would have been on an Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer. I said that the Resurgent fixed the issues of the Star Destroyer line. Perhaps that is a bit more generous, but the First Order have made some serious advancements. First of all, the ship has redundant shield generators. Not all the bulbs are in one place, and you can't destroy the ship's shields just by hitting one target. Additionally, not only does the Resurgent have a much smaller and less pronounced bridge, but there's also additional point defense turrets, and there is a secondary bridge within the ship that can be used in cases of emergency. Let's move on to the final category now, carrying capacity. We don't have official numbers for the fighters carried by the Resurgent, but we know the Battlecruiser would have carried standard First Order TIE fighters as well as the Special Forces variant. I will just try to guess at numbers here. We know that a standard Imperial 2 class Star Destroyer carried about 70 TIE fighters. I'm going to add an extra 30 to the Resurgent, but they'll all be Special Forces. I come to this number because the Resurgent is over a kilometer longer, and I'm going to assume that the First Order did learn from the mistakes of the Empire. So in total, that's 70 First Order TIE fighters and 30 Special Forces TIE fighters, times 2 because we have 2 Star Destroyers here. Talking now about the Super Star Destroyer, there is a bit of controversy in this area. The Starships of the Galaxy Guide gives the Super Star Destroyer 144 fighters. Now, that is obviously a ludicrously low number. A ship that large should have thousands of fighters, if not more. However, it does give a somewhat solid rationale. It says the massive hangar of the ship can hold thousands of fighters and not an inconsiderable number of small capital ships, but such an arrangement is rarely advantageous. Standard practice sets the complement of the Executor at 144 TIEs of various types, 200 support ships, 3 pre-generated garrisons, and hundreds of heavy walkers. It then continues saying, nor is it realistically necessary for the Executor to have more fighters because it's always with a support fleet, and it's unlikely that the rebels could muster enough fighters to challenge 144 anyway in most circumstances. I do find that that explanation does make some sense, and because I don't just want to pick numbers at random, and because I've used the 144 number in the past, I don't want to go too crazy. Still, I don't think 144 is reasonable, so I'm going to double it and then add a little bit to give them an even 300. Let's now move to the actual matchup itself, discussing intangibles along the way. So the greatest issue facing any large dreadnought, and the Super Star Destroyer is no exception to this, is a lack of flexibility. I know I bring this up a lot, but Thrawn brings this up himself in his new canon novel. He was, to be fair, speaking on strategic terms on a macro level, but the same is true of tactics and with an individual battle. Without a support fleet, a Super Star Destroyer will struggle to face multiple smaller ships. Now typically this can be overcome just through sheer firepower and durability. However, when dealing with something very advanced like a Resurgent Class Battlecruiser, a powerful ship in its own right, things start to get interesting. The problems of the Executor here, which again are a bit of inflexibility, are exacerbated by its design. The ship is really meant to focus a lot of firepower on one target. This leaves it vulnerable. This is further exacerbated by the presence of several weak points. For the Super Star Destroyer, I think that these are the engine block, where there's no turbo lasers to cover, and the superstructure. The First Order here also has an advantage in the starfighter category. Although they are outnumbered quite significantly by the forces of the Executor, First Order TIEs are vastly superior, and that's double for the Special Forces variant. First of all of the ships have shields, their own hyperdrive, and really, there's a more focus on quality, where the Empire notably focused on quantity. 2 First Order TIEs are, in my opinion, easily worth 3 of the Empires. So, how does this battle play out? The Executor and the 2 Resurgent Class Star Destroyers come head to head in open space. Who wins? First of all, I do think the Resurgents here have a speed advantage. The Executor was noted for being fairly fast for a dreadnought. It has many large engines. However, I do think that the much smaller ships will be more nimble and will be able to outmaneuver and outspeed the Executor. I think then the best strategy for the 2 ships is to completely split the fire of the Executor. Most likely one ship will have to take most of the brunt of its attack. The other will likely move into some weak spot where it will be relatively protected. I think that this will probably be right behind the ship. Again, the main strategy for the 2 Resurgents will be to move as far away as possible from each other. Once that one ship is in a sensitive location, it will likely be able to stay there for the entire battle. Now, it will still be taking some fire, and if it weren't a powerful ship, it wouldn't be able to stay there indefinitely. Many of the TIE fighters will likely focus on it, but with the Resurgence's powerful point defense system, and with its fairly competent fighters on its own, it should be able to survive. While there, it will be inflicting large amounts of damage on the Executor's engine and on its bridge. These are the two central weak points of the dreadnought. The First Order has both a strategic and a technological advantage. The Executor is somewhat of a blunt weapon. This blunt weapon is enough to take down most ships. It could take down probably 4 or 5, maybe even more Mon Calamari ships on its own, but the Resurgent is just next level. 2 working in tandem will be enough to take down the Super Star Destroyer, with one doing most of the damage and the other being possibly destroyed or at least crippled. But the Resurgents will win. I haven't really mentioned the starfighter combat much, but it's pretty clear to me that the 2 First Order ships will absolutely wipe the floor with the Imperial TIE fighters. This will further exacerbate the strategic disadvantage faced by the Executor here and will really help seal the victory for the First Order. All in all, I think 2 Resurgent should be able to beat an Executor class Super Star Destroyer, despite the massive difference in size, tonnage, armaments, and basically everything else, at least at a first glance, 7.5 times out of 10. 1 Resurgent has literally 0 chance of beating the larger ship, but 2 working together should be able to finish it fairly easy. Or at least that's my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Am I overestimating just the quality of the Resurgent Class Star Destroyer? Am I underestimating just the true power of the Super Star Destroyer, or did I get it right? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to suggest your future video ideas. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider donating on Patreon. Also, don't forget tomorrow is our first ever Patreon game session. We'll be playing sometime in the afternoon, and the game will be Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PC. If you're unable to play it, you can always watch it. I'll be streaming the whole thing on twitch.tv/EckhartsLadder. If you are a patron and you want more information, just post on the Patreon page. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.